Welcome to the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. This lecture is intended for students enrolled in the Academy's Latin Reading 2B course. If you're not enrolled and would like to join us for self-paced studies, visit classicalliberalarts.com. My name is William Michael. I'm the Academy Headmaster, and I'll be leading this study of Cicero's first epistle to his wife Terentia in the collection that was made by John Sturmius. We begin, as I said, our study of what are called the familiar epistles of Marcus Tullius Cicero. They're called familiar because they're written to his relatives and friends. Cicero was a great Roman orator and philosopher who lived from 106 to 43 BC. The dates of his life are very significant because they almost exactly match the dates of the life of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar lived from 100 to 44 BC. Cicero lived from 106 to 43 BC. So anytime we study the writings of Cicero, we're enjoying a peek into the world of Julius Caesar and the late Roman Republic. As I mentioned, these epistles that we're going to study are personal letters that were composed by Cicero. Some of them were written to Cicero, written to his family members and close friends. And so these letters reveal to us much of his private thoughts, daily concerns of his life, and they do so in a most excellent Latin prose that has been admired and considered the model of the highest quality Latin composition that ever existed, and that has been true for over 2,000 years. This first epistle, written to his wife Terentia, provides us with an introduction to the standard format and many of the common expressions that are used in Roman letter writing, and they also provide us with essential vocabulary that we're going to see again and again, and grammatical structures worth studying that will appear throughout all Latin correspondence and other forms of Latin prose. Cicero was considered and is considered the master of the Latin language, and even more importantly, his moral character made his works highly valued by the church fathers and many medieval scholars who saw in the writings of Cicero, as in other of the virtuous pagans, a preparation for Christian wisdom and an example of natural virtue that was to be in history perfected by divine grace, and provides us with a model or standard for the potential of human virtue before the grace of Christ. So with that as an introduction, we'll begin the study of this first epistle. But before we do that, let's take a minute to devote our time to the Lord and ask Him to bless and direct our studies. Let us pray. Lord our God, in your wisdom and love, you surround us with the mysteries of the universe. Send your Spirit upon us and fill us with your wisdom and blessings. Grant that we may devote ourselves to our studies and draw ever closer to you, the source of all knowledge. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Since this epistle is relatively short, we'll read it together here. I'll read through it, that is, in this lecture. And what I recommend if you're listening is to read along with me if you've got a copy of the letter in front of you, or if not, just listen. And make sure you take time to practice proper pronunciation. Make good use of this opportunity to continue to improve your understanding of the orthography of the Latin language and proper pronunciation. Remember that because Cicero lived as a Roman in classical Roman history, when we read his writings, we should read them with classical pronunciation. The reason why that's important is because euphony is a principle of all good composition, and we can be sure that when Cicero was writing his letters, he would give attention to euphony, and that euphony was based on how he would have pronounced the Latin language, not as Europeans would pronounce it hundreds of years later. So let's read Cicero's writings with classical pronunciation, and I'll be sure to do that. So let's read this epistle together. Marcus Tullius Cicero, Terentiae, salutem plurimam dicit. Si vales bene est, ego valeo. Nos quotidie tabellarios vestros expectamus, qui si venerint, fortasse erimus certiores, quid nobis faciendum sit, faciemusque te statim certiorem, valetudinem tuam cura diligenter, vale, calendis septembribus. So there we have the text of the subject of our study in this lesson, and having introduced it, having read the text, let's go ahead and divide it into its significant parts. We're going to divide this epistle, even though it's short, we'll divide it into 5 parts. And as we study other epistles in the future, you'll see that the length of the epistles may change, but these parts tend to be pretty common. So it's important for us to pay attention to not just the content of this particular epistle, but the quality of Roman epistles in general. So as we look at this first epistle, we'll divide it into 5 significant parts. The first part, beginning with Cicero's greeting, where he just introduces himself, Marcus Tullius Cicero, addresses his wife Terentia, and then wishes her health, salutem plurimam dicit. This is the greeting formula, this first part, the greeting formula. This opening follows a standard Roman pattern of giving the sender's name, the recipient's name, and an abbreviated greeting. If you look at the original text, you'll see that instead of saying salutem plurimam dicit, it just says SPD. The use of these abbreviations is possible because these greetings were common. The second part, beginning with si vales bene est, is Cicero's inquiry into Terentia's health, the health inquiry. He says, si vales bene est, ego valeo. The third part of the epistle is Cicero's main message, the real point that he wanted to communicate. This begins where he writes, nos quotidie. So that's part 3, the main message. In part 4, Cicero returns to address his wife's health, and he gives her advice. This begins where he says, valetudinem tuam cura diligenter. And then lastly, part 5, his closing formula, where we read him write vale, and then he gives the date, calendis septembribus. So these 5 parts, the greeting formula, the health inquiry, the main message, The health advice and the closing formula make up five significant parts of this epistle from Cicero to his wife Terentia. So having read the letter, having divided it into its parts, let's now go and actually study each line, each clause of this epistle and make sure that we understand everything that we read. Remember, in Latin Reading 2, we're moving on from the simple study of Latin reading for the sake of vocabulary building, which we did in Latin Reading 1, and we're now giving attention to the grammar of the readings. If you have not studied Latin Grammar 1, I think this is going to be too difficult for you. So you should probably wait to go on with this course until you've made some progress in Latin grammar. But if you've studied Latin Grammar 1 as you studied Latin Reading 1, which is what we recommend, you should be ready to enter into the study of Latin Grammar 2. And either way, I'll be careful to explain everything, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So let's begin with the interpretation. The first line, as I mentioned, is a greeting, a common greeting. We read, Marcus Tullius Cicero, Terentiae, salutem plurimam dicit. We have Cicero's full Roman name given in the nominative case to identify the sender. We read Marcus Tullius Cicero. Marcus is his praenomen or first name. Tullius is his nomen, his family name, and then Cicero is his cognomen, which is another kind of family name. In English history, in English educational history, you'll see Cicero referred obviously to as Cicero, but also as Tully. And you can see that his nomen, his middle name here, is Tullius. And that's where that English name Tully comes from. So Marcus Tullius Cicero, nominative case, all masculine forms, identifies the sender of the letter. We then read Terentiae. Terentiae, and this is the name of Cicero's wife, Terentia, and it's set in the dative singular form because the greetings are being given to Terentia. She's the indirect object, and hence her name is set in the dative case. We then read salutem plurimam, which is in the accusative case. This is the direct object of the verb dicit, which we'll get to in a second. Salutem means health. If you convert that U into a V, you see where our word salvation comes from, the idea of health. In Spanish, the word for health is salud, comes from this same Latin word. So salutem means health, and then plurimam is a superlative adjective, So we could translate it as most, or we can translate it as very much. So salutem plurimam means health very much. And then dicit is the verb expressing the greeting. It's third person singular and present. It means he says, and that refers back to the subject Cicero. So Cicero says very much health to Terentia. To put that into English word order, to keep it in the original Latin word order, it's Marcus Tullius Cicero to Terentia, health very much says. That's this first opening line, the first part and greeting of the epistle. He then goes on to inquire of his wife's health. He says, si vales bene est. Si vales bene est. Now, there was a lot of chaos and trouble in the life of Cicero. There were times when he was away from his family because of his political duties, because of travels that were necessary. There was also a time when he was away because he was exiled. And there was all sorts of controversy. Remember, this is the time of Julius Caesar, so there's all of this political turmoil and trouble going on, and Cicero was right in the midst of all of that as one of the most significant, one of the most influential men in the Roman Republic. So in the midst of all of that chaos, he says this to his wife: Si vales bene est. Si vales bene est. Si means if, it's a conjunction. If. Vales is a verb. We see the S ending, which marks the second person singular, and the verb comes from valere, which means to be well. So he says, si vales, if you are well. If you are well. Bene est. Bene is an adverb. It means well. So these are two different ideas of well. Vales has to do with wellness as far as health is concerned, physical wellness. Bene has to do, more generally speaking, with just a good situation. He says, si vales, if you are well. Bene est, well est, it is. In other words, everything is fine as long as you are well. A very, very loving message to his wife. In the midst of all of the trouble, I want you to know that as long as you are well, it is well with us. So we have si vales bene est. Very simple. And then he follows that with ego valeo, a word of assurance and comfort to his wife. Don't worry about me. Everything's fine. As long as you are well, it is well. Ego valeo means I am well. We move on then to the main message of the epistle, the main message that Cicero wished to communicate outside of his just loving concern and comfort for his wife. He says, nos quotidie tabellarios vestros expectamus. Nos is a pronoun, it's plural, it's in the nominative case here, it means we, the subject, we. Now that we could be plural and refer to a number of people, but sometimes this pronoun we is used to refer just to one person. So we don't know whether Cicero's actually referring to a group of people or just himself with this common use of we, even though we're talking about an individual. So he says, we quotidie. Quotidie is an adverb. It means daily or every day. So we daily tabellarios vuestros. We see the os ending at the end of each of these words, which identifies the accusative case. So these are the direct object of the verb that we're going to look at next. Tabellarios means letter carriers or messengers. Let's use the word messengers here. So we daily messengers vuestros. Vuestros is a pronoun that means your, and it modifies tabellarios. So we daily, nos quotidie, tabellarios vuestros, messengers your, expectamus. And if you look at the word expectamus, we see the preposition ex joined with the verb spectamus, which comes from spectare, which means to look. So expectamus means we look out. We look out. Nos quotidie tabellarios nostros expectamus. We daily, messengers your, look out for. We daily, messengers your, look out for. The translation that I list with the exposition is we await. We're expecting, but what that verb literally means is we are looking out for. We are watching out for. Imagine someone standing at the window waiting for the mailman to show up. He's expecting him. He's literally looking out for him. So this is Cicero's main message. We are expecting daily your messengers. Then he goes on to say, qui si venerint. Qui si venerint. Qui is a relative pronoun. It's in the nominative case. Qui refers back to the tabellarios. So he says, we daily await your messengers, qui, who, si, if, we already saw that in a previous line, who if venerint or venerint, they will have come. They will have come. Notice that that is a subjunctive verb. So we have the conjunction if introducing a condition, and we then have a subjunctive verb rather than an indicative verb. So pay attention to the moods as we move through this. In the exposition, I believe that I labeled it as a perfect tense verb, but it can also be future perfect tense. Some people doubt whether there is such a thing as a future perfect subjunctive, but there is. And the translation of this verb proves that. So he says, we daily await your messengers who, if they shall have come, fortasse erimus certiores. Fortasse erimus certiores. Fortasse is an adverb that's translated as perhaps or maybe. Fortasse, perhaps. Erimus is a verb. It's first person plural. You see the mus ending. And it's also future tense. So perhaps we shall be. It's a future tense of the verb esse, to be. Erimus, we shall be. Certiores. Certiores. Certiores is an example of a comparative adjective. You see the ores ending. So perhaps we shall be more certain. Perhaps we shall be more certain. Quid nobis faciendum sit. Quid nobis faciendum sit. So quid is a pronoun. It means what. Nobis, we can see that's a pronoun. It's a form of the word nos, which we've seen earlier in this lesson. It can be in the dative case or the ablative case. They're both the same in the plural, but based on the context, we'll see here that it's in the ablative case. Remember, the dative case identifies the indirect object, a person to whom or for whom something is done or given. The ablative case has many different meanings in Latin. One of them is the ablative of agency, or a person who does something. And that's what we have here. He says, quid nobis, what by us, faciendum sit. Faciendum is a participle. It comes from the verb facere or facere, which means to make or to do. That nd that you see in the midst of the word, that's the signal of the future passive participle, which is translated as to be done. So faciendum, to be done. It's worth noting that in Latin grammar, this form is called the gerundive. And the reason why is because the participle faciendum has a simple meaning. It just means to be done. It's future and passive. To be done. But the idea that's expressed in that participle can be used in a figurative kind of way to express an obligation. The example I usually give to my students is if your father walks into your bedroom and the room is a mess and he says to you, "This room is to be cleaned." He speaks in the future passive. He's not predicting the future. He's telling you what you're going to do. That's the purpose, that's the message of the gerundive. It takes this future passive participle and uses it to express an obligation. A similar idea, similar use of the future tense is seen in the Ten Commandments, where God says, "Thou shalt not kill." That's not a simple future statement. God is not predicting the future there and saying, you're not going to kill anyone. He's actually issuing a command and saying, you shall not kill. In other words, you may not kill, or you ought not to kill. That's similar to this idea of the gerundive, of the future passive participle in Latin. So faciendum is to be done. What by us, to be done, and then sit. Sit is a form of the verb esse. So we've seen est, we've seen es, we've seen erimus, and now we see sit. They're all different forms of the same basic verb to be. Sit is a subjunctive verb. It's third person singular and present subjunctive. It means it may be. And the it refers back to what. So quid nobis faciendum sit. What by us may be done or should be done. Next he says, or he continues with that and says, faciemus quae te statim certiorem. Faciemus quae te statim certiorem. We see faciemus, we've already seen faciendum. Faciemus is a different form of that verb from which faciendum is derived. Faciemus means we shall do. It's future tense, or we shall make. Future tense, you see the mus ending, which means we, first person plural. So we shall make, or we shall do. The que ending is actually a conjunction. That que is a conjunction that's attached as a suffix to the end of a word. It means and. So faciemus que, and we shall do, or and we shall make. Te is a pronoun. It's second person, so it means you. And here, it's in the accusative case. So we shall make you. You is the direct object of the verb in the accusative case. And we shall make you statim. Statim is an adverb that means immediately. And then we have certiorem. Certiorem, again, a comparative adjective meaning more certain. So this line reads, faciemus que te statim certiorem, and we shall make you immediately more certain. So what Cicero says there to his wife is, we're looking out every day for your messengers, waiting for the information that we're supposed to receive from them, because until we get that information, we really don't know what we ought to do. We really can't make any decisions. We can't figure out what our next activity should be. So we are waiting for your messengers who, if they shall have come, perhaps we shall be made more certain. We'll have information that we can use in our deliberation to figure out what we should do. And when that happens, when I get more information and I make some progress in my planning, then faciemusque te statim certiorem. We shall make you immediately more certain. So you can see what's happening here. Terentia is asking Cicero for information. What's going on? What are we doing? Cicero, in the meantime, is still waiting for messages to come through Terentia's messengers and saying, look, until I get more information, I'm not sure what we're doing yet. So Once your messengers arrive, then perhaps we will be more certain, and then we will make you immediately more certain as well. We'll give you an answer once we get that answer ourselves. So that's Cicero's message to his wife. He's asking her to calm down and wait, because they're not sure what they're doing yet, because they're still collecting information. So we see him calming her anxiety, calming her concern about the future, and most importantly, we see him focusing her attention on what she should be concerned with, which is her own health. He goes on then to say, Valetudinem tuam cura diligenter. Valetudinem tuam cura diligenter. Valetudinem, it's in the accusative case. You can see the M ending. Valetudinem means health. Tuam is a pronoun that means your. So valetudinem tuam, your health. Cura is a command. He says cura, which means take care of or give attention to. And then diligenter is an adverb that modifies cura. How should she care for her health? Diligenter, diligently. So as Terentia writes to Cicero or communicates with Cicero, asking questions about what's going on, he tells her, pay attention to your own health. Take care of yourself. If you are well, everything is fine. It's a really beautiful message from a man who is wrapped up in extremely stressful circumstances, receiving the concern of his wife and saying, listen, don't worry about me. Don't worry about this. Take care of yourself. If you are well, everything's fine. It's a really beautiful message. And then he concludes the epistle with standard farewell. He says, vale, which literally means be well or farewell. It's a command to be well, farewell, second person and singular. So that's just a standard closing to a conversation. He then gives us the date when the epistle was composed, calendis septembribus, which means on the calends of September. Septembribus modifies calendis. It doesn't actually say the calends of September. It really just says on the September calends. The calends, which is where we get the word calendar from. Calends means the first day of the month, when the new month was announced, usually by a priest in an ancient city. They were literally tracking the phases of the moon to measure the months of the year. The calendar and things still were in development. The calends was the first day of the month, so he wrote this on the calends of September, or the September calends. There were 3 different days from which the ancients, at least the Romans, determined the dates of the days. The calends was the first day of the month, and then there were also the nones and the ides. So you can look that up and study that on your own, how the Romans measured the days of the month. It's interesting. But here in this epistle, we just see Cicero identifying the September calends as the day on which he composed this epistle. So that's all the content of the epistle as far as exposition and grammar are concerned. We talked about quite a bit there. So you can see even in a short epistle, there's a lot to work through and interpret. What I'd like to do is just provide a summary translation which preserves the word order. So this is a very literal translation of the text. What we read is this, and what I'd like you to do anytime you're reading Latin is try to keep everything in the original word order and learn to think in Latin word order. Learn to think in Latin word order. It's not difficult. It just takes a little practice as you're getting started. Hopefully from Latin Reading 1, you've already learned to do this. But here's the literal translation, preserving original word order. Marcus Tullius Cicero to Terentia, greeting or health very much, says, if you are well, well it is. I am well. We daily messengers we await, who if they will have come, perhaps we will be more certain what for us to be done may be, and we will make you immediately more certain. Health your take care of carefully, or take care of diligently. Farewell, on the September calends. Now, a more idiomatic and properly English translation, which is good so that we can make sure we understand the message of the epistle, is the following. Marcus Tullius Cicero sends very much or the warmest greetings to Terentia. If you are well, that's good. I am well. We await your messengers daily, and if they come, perhaps we will be more certain about what we should do, and we will inform you immediately. Take care of your health diligently. Farewell. Written on the 1st of September. So, in this first epistle, we see a demonstration of the formal structure, the ordinary structure of Roman letter writing, but more importantly, and this is one of the reasons why it's good to study these familiar epistles, we see the relationship and the affection between Cicero and his wife. It's common for people to say and present this message that before Christianity, the world was just filled with evil and everybody was perverted and all of the pagans were sexually immoral and filthy and unjust, and that's simply not true. There was a history of virtuous pagans who lived according to natural virtue, who lived according to reason, who studied philosophy, and Cicero was an example of such a man. So in this epistle, we see this beautiful relationship between Cicero and his wife. The language of the epistle is challenging in some places because it really pressures us to rely on our knowledge of Latin grammar to translate and understand it accurately. So that's the intention of this course, to move away from the writings of the gospel, which we're familiar with and comfortable with, and to move into content and a context that's less familiar to us. So the language can be challenging, not too challenging, but more challenging than we faced in Latin Reading 1. And remember, we're reading here the Latin writing of history's greatest Latin speaker and writer. We're reading the writings of the master of the Latin language. So we should expect to find some things that are extraordinary, even though these are familiar epistles. So we see that his concern for his wife's health, him working to maintain frequent conversation, communicating any information that he can. It's hard to imagine the difficulty of communication. In ancient times, we send messages, text messages, emails, and communicate within seconds around the world. I have a son who is in Iraq and Syria in the military. We communicate in seconds, day by day. It's hard to imagine life in the ancient world where you might be separated from your loved ones and have to wait weeks to hear anything from them. It must have been very difficult to deal with, but we see this couple, Cicero and his wife, working to communicate in spite of those challenges. We see his concern for her health there. efforts at communication. We see his expression of care for her, trying to help her to calm down and take care of herself. We see his virtues of prudence, justice, and temperance all on display. We see a good man in Cicero, especially when we consider that he lives 40 plus years before the Christian era. So again, while Cicero wrote as a pagan philosopher, a pagan politician and rhetorician, we see in him a disposition to what is good, his attention to duty, natural virtue in protecting family bonds and relationships, carefully communicating. He's an example of all of the principles of natural law that Catholic teaching sees as a preparation for supernatural virtue. Remember, the concept in Catholic philosophy is that the grace of God builds on virtue. The grace of God builds on nature, I should say. And we see that virtue, there is a virtue which is natural. Grace builds on nature. So that brings us to the end of the interpretation for this epistle. And before we finish up here, I'd like to give you 10 points for memorization, 10 helpful points that are worth committing to memory. Number 1, Roman letters begin with the sender's name in the nominative case. Roman letters begin with the sender's name in the nominative case. We saw Marcus Tullius Cicero. Number 2, the recipient's name appears in the dative case. The recipient's name appears in the dative case. We saw Terentia. Third, if you're looking at the original source, the original book from which the epistle was taken for this lesson, you'll see the greeting, Salutem plurimam dicit, just summarized with the abbreviation SPD. SPD stands for Salutem plurimam dicit, meaning the author sends greetings. Number 4, the phrase si vales bene est is a common health inquiry in Roman letters. We always do this when we meet people, greet people, we'll ask, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How is your mother? How's your family? Is everyone in good health? And so on. That concern for health, which is often normal in greetings. Si vales bene est. Standard health inquiry that we'll see in Roman letters. Number 5, ego valeo means I am well, and reports Cicero's condition. Ego valeo, I am well. Number 6, tabellarii. Tabellarii, that's the Latin name for messengers or letter carriers. Number 7, the gerundive, which we saw in the word faciendum, the gerundive expresses not just future passive, not just the idea of a future passive verb, but it expresses the idea of necessity or obligation, about to do, or about to be done, I should say. About to be done, needs to be done, ought to be done. That's the idea of the gerundive. Number 8, vale is a standard farewell, which literally means to be well or farewell. Number 9, Roman dates used the calends, nones, and ides system. As I said, you can look that up online and find plenty of information. But those are the 3 days of the month based on the phases of the moon, from which all of the other days received their numbers and were measured. So the calends, the nones, and the ides, the Roman dating system. Think about, speaking of Cicero and Julius Caesar, if you know the story of Julius Caesar's death, remember that the prophet warned him to beware of the ides or the ides of March. You can see how they referred to the days of the month. So Roman dates use the calends, nones, and ides system. And then lastly, number 10, Cicero's letters show natural virtue and family devotion before the Christian era in non-Christian Christian non-Jewish lands, showing us this principle of the natural law at work in the hearts of men outside of Israel. So those are your 10 memory work points for this lesson. So in this lecture, to bring this to an end, we've studied Cicero's first epistle to his wife Terentia. We've discussed the structure of Roman letters, different formulas that are used in epistles, grammatical structures that include, we've seen the gerundive and the subjunctive forms in this lesson. The moral character we discussed, which is revealed here in Cicero's personal correspondence, and much more. Having gone through that, now it's time for you to do the work of a student. You've got to reread this lesson, study all of the content of this lesson, and make this lesson your own. The word comprehend means to take hold of. It's time for you to take hold of all that's available to you in this lesson. Work to develop your understanding. Follow the instructions in my article, How to Study for Mastery. Develop your understanding through those steps, and then demonstrate that understanding by completing the graded assessments that are available in the course on the study center. As you go through this, as you do that work, if you have any questions or need any help, please visit the Academy Help Center at classicalliberal.com/support. And you can also post questions for me or for classmates on the forum on the course page, the Latin reading 2B course page. So once again, my name is William Michael, the headmaster of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and I hope that this lecture has been helpful. God bless your studies.